I used to think betrayal was something you could prepare for, like a storm you watch on radar. You board the windows. You secure the roof. You wait it out. I was wrong. Betrayal doesn't announce itself with sirens. It arrives in whispers, in a text left on a counter, in a glance held too long, in a door left unlocked when it should have been sealed. 8 hours before my wedding, I learned the difference between a crisis and a collapse. A crisis tests you. Collapse replaces you. I wasn't tested. I was replaced by the two people I trusted to stand beside me. My fiancé, my brother. The rehearsal dinner had been perfect, or so I thought. My mother had cried when I toasted. My father had shaken my brother's hand. Clara had worn the dress I'd helped pick out. Everything felt aligned, until I went back to the hotel room to retrieve my cufflinks. The door wasn't locked. I should have noticed that. I should have noticed the silence. The way the bathroom light was on. The way the shower was still running. I didn't knock. I walked in, and I saw them, not kissing, not arguing, just standing there, towels on the floor, water dripping from the tile, her hand on his chest, his fingers in her hair, the kind of stillness that only comes when two people know they've crossed a line and have decided to stay on the other side. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood in the doorway, felt the floor drop out, not because of the sight, because of the recognition, the kind that hits you when you realize the people who promised to hold you up are the ones who just let go. I asked why, not for closure, for data. Clara didn't cry, didn't apologize, just said it had been happening for months, said they'd tried to stop, said they couldn't, said it was real. My brother didn't look at me, he looked at the floor, said he'd loved her first, said he'd stepped back when I met her, said he couldn't keep pretending he didn't want her. I listened, not because I believed them, because I needed to hear the script before I burned it. I told them to pack, to leave the hotel, to cancel the vendors, to inform the guests. I didn't ask them to. I told them. They didn't argue. They just nodded, like they'd already rehearsed this moment. Maybe they had. I walked to the lobby, sat in a chair, watched the rain start, felt the weight of 8 years of planning dissolve into a single hour of silence. I called my parents, not to beg, to inform. I told them what I'd seen, told them the wedding was off, told them I was handling the cancellations. My mother's voice didn't break. It hardened. She said I was overreacting, said people make mistakes, said love is complicated, said Clara had been stressed, said my brother had been lonely, said I should talk to them, work it out, postpone, not cancel. I said it wasn't a postponement. It was a termination. She said I was throwing away a family for pride. I said I was refusing to build a marriage on a lie. She hung up. I called my father. Same conversation, different words. He said family forgives. He said I was being selfish. He said they'd come to the house. We'd figure it out. I said there was nothing to figure out. He said if I walked away, I walked away from them too. I said I already had. He didn't argue. He just said don't expect us to call. I said I wouldn't. I ended the call, sat in the lobby, watched the clock tick, felt the quiet settle into my bones. It wasn't grief. It was clarity, the kind that comes when you realize the foundation was never yours. You just paid for the upkeep. By evening, the cancellations were processed. The venue kept the deposit. The caterer refunded half. The photographer invoiced me for the full day. I paid it, not out of guilt, out of principle. I don't leave debts unpaid. I don't leave obligations unmet. I just leave people who treat my loyalty like a convenience. I packed my car, drove to my apartment, found a note taped to the door. From my parents. You made your choice. We're making ours. Don't come to the house. Don't call. We're standing with Clara and your brother. Family stays together, even when it's hard. I folded the note, put it in my glove compartment, drove to a motel, paid cash, used a burner number, told no one. I needed silence. I needed to think. I needed to remember what it felt like to exist without performing. I lay on the stiff bed, stared at the water stain on the ceiling, listened to the highway hum, and for the first time in 32 years, I felt completely alone. Not lonely. Alone. There's a difference. Lonely is missing someone. Alone is realizing no one is coming. I turned the thought over in my head like a stone. Smooth. Heavy. Unavoidable. I thought about my job. 30 months as a project lead at a mid-tier engineering firm. My boss had known me since college. My team relied on me. I'd built systems that kept projects on schedule.
Ide mantura junios.
I'd taken the late shifts. I'd never missed a deadline. I opened my work email on my phone. Found a message sent at 4:15 that afternoon. From HR. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated due to performance concerns and team instability. We wish you the best. I read it twice. Closed the app. Didn't cry. Didn't rage. Just noted it. They'd known about the wedding. They'd known about my family. They'd known I was under pressure. And they'd used it as an excuse to cut the cord. I wasn't surprised. Loyalty is expensive. Most companies only buy it wholesale. I packed a single bag. Jeans. 2 shirts. A sweater. My laptop. My passport. My birth certificate. I left the rest. The furniture. The photos. The ring. The life I'd built on a promise that wasn't mine to keep. I didn't look back. I drove to a storage facility. Rented a unit. Paid cash. Packed my essential documents. A single change of clothes. I left the rest. I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew I was done funding illusions. I was done paying for loyalty that was never returned. I was done being the foundation for people who only noticed me when they were sinking. I would build my own ground, brick by brick, day by day, quietly, consistently, unapologetically. The blueprint was clear. The foundation was set. I was ready for the next phase. Not with them, with me. I didn't run. I relocated. There's a difference. Running implies panic. Relocation implies strategy. I booked a monthly rental in a quiet suburb. Cash deposit. No credit check. Landlord didn't ask questions. I unpacked the essentials. Laptop. Passport. Notebook. A change of clothes. I sat on the floor, back against the wall. Listened to the silence. It wasn't empty. It was clean. I opened the laptop, connected to public Wi-Fi, created new accounts, new email, new banking, new number. I transferred what I could. Not everything, just what I had built before the wedding plans started. My personal savings, my emergency fund, my retirement accounts. I left the joint accounts. Let them drain. Let them argue over who spent what. Let them discover the wedding deposits were non-refundable. I hadn't sabotaged. I just stopped funding. Funding requires consent. Consent requires honesty. They had neither. By day 3, the messages started. Not to me. I had blocked them. To mutual friends. To former coworkers. To my parents. Clara posted a vague social media story. A black screen with white text. When someone you love disappears without a word, it breaks you. My brother commented with a broken heart emoji. I didn't read the replies. I didn't need to. I knew the script. Victimhood. Confusion. Performative grief. They would play it perfectly. They always did. I muted the notifications. Deleted the apps. Opened a browser. Started searching for contract work. My field was project management and systems coordination. Remote. Flexible. High demand. I updated my resume, stripped the wedding ring from the photo, removed the shared address, submitted 5 applications before noon, 2 replied by 4, interviews scheduled for the next 2 days. Prepared, not with desperation, with precision. Precision doesn't beg, it demonstrates. I wore a clean shirt, sat at the kitchen table, logged into the calls. The hiring managers were direct, asked about my experience. My problem-solving style, My capacity for independent work. I answered clearly. No embellishment. No gaps. No drama. One offered a 6-month contract. Remote. Full-time. I accepted. Signed digitally. Received the onboarding packet. Set up my workspace. Bought a desk. A chair. A lamp. I didn't decorate. I didn't personalize. I just built a function. Function doesn't require nostalgia. It requires execution. I executed. Every day. 8 hours. Focused. Uninterrupted. The silence of the apartment wasn't lonely. It was operational. I liked it. I needed it. I was rebuilding a nervous system that had been trained to anticipate betrayal. I retrained it to anticipate routine. Routine is predictable. Predictability is safe. Safety is the foundation of everything else. By week 2, the financial reality hit them. I knew because a cousin's forwarded email mentioned missed rent payments. I knew because a former vendor posted about unexpected invoice disputes. I knew because the venue sent a final notice to the joint email I had abandoned. They were scrambling. The deposits were gone. The vendors were invoicing. The lease was in both our names. The joint credit cards were maxed. I hadn't touched them in years. I had trusted. They had spent. Now the bill was due, and I wasn't there to pay it. I didn't feel guilt. I felt equilibrium. Balance restored. Not through revenge. Through absence. Absence is the loudest statement you can make when words have been weaponized. I let them sit in it. Let them negotiate. Let them blame each other. Let them realize the life they had built on my back had no foundation when I stepped off. I started running, not to escape, to regulate. 3 miles at dawn. For by week 3, 5 by week 4, I tracked my pace, my heart rate, my breathing. I learned to measure progress in increments, not miles, minutes, not distance. Discipline. Discipline doesn't care about your past. It only cares about your present. I gave it my present. I stopped checking the time zone difference, stopped wondering what they were doing, stopped imagining their conversations. I replaced speculation with structure. Structure heals what chaos broke. I bought groceries, cooked simple meals, washed my own clothes, paid my own bills. I did it not because I had to, because I chose to. Choice is the antidote to erasure. I had been erased. I was choosing myself back. 1 meal, 1 run, 1 invoice at a time. By month 2, the contract work stabilized. I received a performance bonus, transferred it to my new account, didn't celebrate, allocated it. 40% savings, 30% emergency, 20% skill development, 10% discretionary. I signed up for a professional certification, studied at night, took notes by hand, tested on a Saturday, passed on the first try. I printed the certificate, placed it on the desk, didn't frame it, just filed it. Proof of progress, proof of focus, proof that I was no longer building a life for 2 people who didn't exist. I was building one for the person who did. Me. I didn't know it then, but the quietest part of the journey was already complete. The leaving, the surviving, the restructuring. What came next wasn't about them. It was about expansion, about connection, about learning to trust without surrendering. I wasn't ready for that yet, but I was preparing. And preparation, when done correctly, is indistinguishable from peace. I received an email from my mother on a Thursday. Subject: please call us. Body: your brother is struggling. Clara is devastated. The silence didn't just protect me. It exposed them. Without the buffer of my presence, the cracks in their narrative widened into fault lines. I didn't need to witness it to understand it. The math was simple. Remove the foundation, watch the structure settle, or collapse. I learned quickly that absence is not a passive state. It is an active force. It strips away the illusion of control. It forces people to face the architecture they built on borrowed support. And when the support leaves, the architecture either adapts or fractures. They fractured. I saw it in the echoes. A cousin's forwarded email about a missed rent payment. A former colleague's casual mention of Clara's sudden job search. A landlord's public notice listing their old address as vacated with unpaid utilities. I didn't track it out of curiosity. I tracked it out of confirmation. Confirmation that the system was working as designed. I had removed the subsidy. They were forced to operate on their own margins. And their margins were thin. Leo's income was project-based, inconsistent, dependent on connections I had quietly maintained for him for years. Clara's design portfolio was strong aesthetically but weak strategically. She had relied on my network for referrals, on my discipline for deadlines, on my presence for credibility. Without it, her freelance pipeline dried up. They moved into a one-bedroom apartment across town. Downgraded, compromised. The lease was tighter. The space was smaller. The reality was heavier. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt equilibrium. Balance restored. Not through malice. Through boundary enforcement. Boundaries don't punish. They clarify. And clarity is the only thing that separates performance from reality. I accelerated my life while there's decelerated. Not to outrun them, to outgrow them. Growth doesn't require competition. It requires focus. I focused on the contract role, delivered ahead of schedule, documented processes, streamlined vendor communications, implemented a tracking dashboard that reduced project delays by 30%. My manager noted it in the quarterly review.
Offrait à permanent position.
Title: Senior Operations Coordinator. Salary: 45% above my previous baseline. Benefits: full, dental, vision, 41K match. I accepted, negotiated a signing bonus, used it to secure a 12-month lease on a ground floor apartment in a quieter neighborhood. Better light, better ventilation, dedicated workspace. I furnished it minimally. A desk, a chair, a bookshelf, a floor lamp, no photos, no artifacts, no reminders of a timeline that had expired. Just function. Function doesn't require nostalgia. It requires discipline. I applied it daily. Wake at 6. Run 4 miles. Shower. Black coffee. Work at 7:30. Lunch at 12:30. 20-minute walk outside. Work until 5:30. Cook. Read. Sleep at 10:30. Repeat. I didn't chase excitement. I cultivated stability. Stability is the quietest form of strength. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates, like interest, like muscle, like trust in your own decisions. I met people, not romantically, not initially, neighbors, co-workers, a guy at the coffee shop who remembered my order and asked about my running pace, a woman at the library who recommended a book on urban infrastructure. We talked, briefly, honestly, no masks, no performances, just presence. I learned that connection doesn't require enmeshment. It requires clarity. Clarity attracts clarity. I started therapy, not because I was broken, because I was recalibrating. My therapist, a man named Dr. Evans, didn't ask about them. He asked about me, about my boundaries, about my definition of loyalty, about the difference between sacrifice and surrender. I learned that I had spent years confusing obligation with love, that I had equated presence with worth, that I had built my identity around being the reliable one, the fixer, the provider, the one who stays. I unlearned it, not quickly, but deliberately. I replaced martyrdom with maintenance. Maintenance doesn't require an audience. It requires consistency. I was consistent. My parents escalated. First calls to old numbers, then emails to the burner account, then a registered letter to my workplace. I didn't open it at the office. I took it home. Read it at the kitchen table. 3 pages. Guilt, nostalgia, ultimatums. Your brother is struggling. Clara is devastated. We don't understand how you could do this. You're tearing the family apart. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, didn't reply, didn't archive, just stored it, like evidence, proof that their love was conditional, conditional on my utility. When I stopped being useful, the love became a demand. I wouldn't fund that transaction. I wouldn't be the emotional ATM for people who only remembered my existence when their own accounts ran dry. I let the inbox fill, let the silence hold, let the boundary stand. I was done funding illusions. I was done paying for loyalty that was never returned. I was done being the foundation for people who only noticed me when they were sinking. I would build my own ground, brick by brick, day by day, quietly, consistently, unapologetically. 6 months in, I received a package. No return address. Inside was my old watch, the one I'd left in the nightstand. The 12-month mark arrived without fanfare. It arrived with metrics, payroll clearance, client retention, project delivery rates. I did not track them for validation. I tracked them for verification. Verification is the antidote to doubt. I had spent too many years doubting my worth because someone else measured it wrong. I stopped outsourcing my self-assessment. I built my own rubric. It did not include loyalty to people who broke it. It included consistency to standards I set. I applied it. Every decision, every contract, every boundary. The work responded. Not with praise, with stability. Stability is the quietest form of strength. It does not announce itself. It accumulates, like interest, like muscle, like trust in your own decisions. I learned about their situation through third parties, not gossip, public records, business filings, court dockets. My brother's consulting venture had collapsed within 8 months. He had burned through savings, relied on referrals I used to quietly manage, failed to secure anchor clients. Clara's freelance portfolio followed the same trajectory. Aesthetic work does not pay overhead. Operational discipline does. They did not have it. They had borrowed it. From me. When I left, the loan came due. I did not call them. I did not check in. I watched the filings, watched the dissolution notices, watched the eviction records. It was not vindication. It was physics. You cannot build on debt and expect equity. You cannot build a marriage on betrayal and expect it to hold. I understood that long before they did. They learned it in courtrooms, in late notices, in empty inboxes. I kept mine full of invoices, paid receipts, compliance certificates. I did not gloat. I just maintained the standard. Standards do not need an audience. They need enforcement. I enforced. I secured a permanent position as senior project manager. Not through luck, through documented delivery. I rebuilt my credit, paid off the wedding vendor debts I had honored out of principle, funded a 6-month emergency reserve, purchased a modest apartment, not a fortress, foundation. I furnished it functionally, a desk, a chair, a bookshelf, a single plant. I watered it every Sunday, thrived, not because I was gifted, because I was consistent. Consistency compounds. I applied it to everything. My finances, my health, my boundaries, my time. I stopped saying yes out of guilt. I started saying no out of clarity. Clarity is the quietest form of power. It does not shout. It does not threaten. It simply excludes what does not fit. And exclusion, when applied correctly, is protection. I protected my peace. Not with walls. With standards. Standards do not negotiate. They hold. I held them. Every day. In every decision. In every quiet morning where I woke up and knew, without doubt, that I belonged to myself. My parents escalated. First calls to old numbers. Then emails to the burner account. Then a registered letter to my new address. I did not open it at work. I took it home. Read it at the kitchen table. 3 pages. Guilt. Nostalgia. Ultimatums. Your brother is struggling. Clara is drowning. We don't understand how you could do this. You're tearing the family apart. Come home. Help us fix it. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, did not reply, did not archive, just stored it, like evidence, proof that their love was conditional, conditional on my utility. When I stopped being useful, the love became a demand. I would not fund that transaction. I would not be the emotional ATM for people who only remembered my existence when their own accounts ran dry. I let the inbox fill, let the silence hold, let the boundary stand. I was done funding illusions. I was done paying for loyalty that was never returned. I was done being the foundation for people who only noticed me when they were sinking. I would build my own ground, brick by brick, Day by day, quietly, consistently, unapologetically, people talk about karma like it's a supernatural strike. Lightning, poetic justice.
Instant payback.
I learned it's not magic. It's math, cause and effect, structure and collapse. You cannot plant betrayal and harvest trust. You cannot borrow someone else's discipline and expect it to sustain your choices. The bill always comes due. It does not arrive with sirens. It arrives with receipts, with declined cards, with empty chairs, with mirrors that stop lying. I watched it unfold, not with satisfaction, with recognition. Recognition that the system works when you stop subsidizing the deficit. I stopped asking why they did it. I started observing what it cost them. The cost was not just money. It was credibility. It was trust. It was the quiet realization that when you burn your foundation, you don't get to complain about the cold. I focused on my routine. Wake at 6. Run 4 miles. Shower. Black coffee. Work at 7:30. Log off at 5:30. Evening walk. Read. Sleep at 10:30. Repeat. The rhythm was no longer a shield. It was a baseline. And baselines, once established, do not require celebration. They require maintenance.
E-Mind-Time Admin.
I started mentoring junior project coordinators, not to fix them, to equip them. I taught them how to read contracts, how to track deliverables, how to separate professional obligation from personal sacrifice. I did not share my story. I shared my systems. Systems do not require trauma to be effective. They require discipline. I provided it. They applied it. I watched them thrive, not because I saved them, because I gave them tools. Tools outlast advice. I kept building, not for an audience, for a standard. The standard was clear. Protect your foundation. Enforce your boundaries. Let the ledger balance itself. I was living it, fully, deliberately, without apology. The blueprint was set. The walls were sealed. The roof held. I was ready for the next phase. Not with the past, with the future. The 18th month didn't arrive with a milestone. It arrived with a pattern. Patterns don't announce themselves. They repeat, and repetition reveals truth. I stopped checking public records for updates. Not because I stopped caring, because I finally understood that tracking their collapse was just another form of tethering. And tethering implies I still needed them to validate my freedom. I didn't. I archived the files, closed the tabs, redirected my attention to what was in front of me. The quarterly review, the team onboarding, the quiet rhythm of a life that no longer required permission to exist. I was promoted to Director of Operations, not because I asked, because the metric spoke. Reduced overhead by 22%, improved delivery timelines by 30%, 0 escalations in 14 months. The promotion came with a title, a raise, and a leadership team of 8. I accepted, didn't celebrate, calibrated. I hired carefully, vetted for accountability, not charisma. Built a culture of documentation over drama. Taught them that transparency isn't vulnerability. It's efficiency. Efficiency scales. Drama doesn't. I stopped using the word family to describe my team. Families tolerate dysfunction in the name of loyalty. Teams replace dysfunction in the name of performance. I chose performance, not because I was cold, because I was responsible. Responsibility doesn't require sentiment. It requires accountability, and accountability requires structure. I provided it, consistently, without apology. I learned about their situation through a former vendor, not gossip, invoice disputes. My brother had tried to launch a second venture, failed to secure capital, relied on personal loans from relatives who quickly learned the difference between investment and desperation. Clara had taken a retail management position, not by choice, by necessity. Her portfolio had dried up. Her references had gone silent. They were living in a basement apartment 2 towns over, splitting utilities, sharing a single vehicle. The lease was month to month. The reality was heavy. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt equilibrium, balance restored, not through malice, through boundary enforcement. Boundaries don't punish. They clarify, and clarity is the only thing that separates performance from reality. I accelerated my life while there's decelerated. Not to outrun them, to outgrow them. Growth doesn't require competition. It requires focus. I focused. Every day. In every decision. In every quiet morning where I woke up and knew, without doubt, that I belonged to myself. I met with Dr. Evans again. Not for crisis. For calibration. He asked if I still felt the weight of their absence. I said no. I felt the weight of my own choices, and that weight was lighter. He nodded, said grief and relief often wear the same clothes until you learn to tell them apart. I had learned. I stopped measuring my peace against their chaos. Comparison is a leak in the foundation. Patched it. I focused on what was in front of me, the feeding schedules of my new routines, the boundary policies, the quiet weekends where I read instead of scrolled. I stopped wondering if they missed me. I started acknowledging that I no longer missed them. That realization didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with a breath. A steady, unshaken breath. The kind that comes when you finally stop holding your breath for someone else's approval. I exhaled. I stood. I continued. Not forward. Upward. Always upward. Always mine. The past tried to re-enter on a Thursday evening. Not through calls. Not through letters. Through a LinkedIn notification. Clara had viewed my profile. Twice in 1 week. I didn't block her. I didn't react. I adjusted my privacy settings. Hid my activity status. Removed location tags. Restricted profile visibility to second-degree connections only. Digital boundaries are just physical boundaries translated into code.
E-coded mean.
Carefully. Deliberately. Without emotion. Emotion is a variable. Variables can be controlled. I controlled mine. I didn't wonder what she wanted. I knew. She wanted the ledger balanced. She wanted the foundation restored. She wanted the subsidy returned. I wouldn't fund it. I had already paid the invoice. In full. In absence. In silence. In structure. Payment doesn't require receipts. It requires finality. I had achieved it. I moved on. Not forward. Upward. The blueprint was clear. The walls were sealed. The roof held. I was ready for the next phase. Not with the past, with the future. The 24-month mark didn't arrive with a milestone. It arrived with a quiet certainty. Certainty that doesn't need proof because it's already baked into the routine. I woke at 6, ran 4 miles, drank black coffee, logged into the dashboard, reviewed project pipelines, approved vendor invoices. The rhythm was no longer a shield. It was a baseline. And baselines, once solidified, don't require celebration. They require maintenance.
I maintained mine.
I learned about their situation through a public court docket. Not a call, not a message, a civil judgment, unpaid vendor contracts, fraudulent misrepresentation in a joint venture filing, asset liquidation ordered, my brother's second consulting entity dissolved, Clara's retail management position terminated for inventory discrepancies. Both names listed as co-responsible for outstanding liabilities. No jail time, just financial and professional ruin. The kind that follows poor architecture. I didn't read it for satisfaction. I read it for confirmation. Confirmation that the ledger balances when you stop subsidizing the deficit. I archived the filing, did not share it, did not comment, Closure does not require a conversation. It requires a conclusion, and conclusions arrive when the math catches up to the behavior. I understood that long before they did. They learned it through notices, through declined cards, through empty inboxes. I learned it through receipts, through compliance, through quiet mornings where I woke up and knew, without doubt, that I had paid my debt to the past, in full, in absence, in structure. I stopped using the word ghosting to describe what I did. Ghosting implies disappearance. What I practiced was extraction. Extraction is deliberate. It is the careful removal of a toxic element before it spreads. I extracted myself from a narrative that was already written without my consent. I did not leave a note. I did not stage a confrontation. I did not give them the satisfaction of my reaction. Reaction is fuel. I cut the supply line. I let the fire burn out on its own. And it did. Not because I was cruel, because I was clear. Clarity does not require volume. It requires precision. I was precise. I left exactly what belonged to them. The lease, the joint accounts, the wedding deposits, the performance. I took exactly what belonged to me. My documents, my savings, my time, my name. Kept my name. That was the most important piece. Identity is not inherited. It is enforced. And I enforced mine. Every day. In every boundary. In every quiet decision to choose myself over obligation. I started volunteering at a small business advisory nonprofit. Not to relive my past. To redirect my skills. I taught inventory management. Risk assessment. Vendor vetting. I didn't preach. I demonstrated. Demonstration doesn't require a stage. It requires a whiteboard. I used it. Carefully. Clearly. Without ego. I learned that leadership isn't about being needed. It's about being unnecessary. When the systems work, the leader can step back. I stepped back. Often. And the work held. That was the proof. Proof that I had built something independent of my presence. Proof that I was no longer the foundation. I was the architect, and architects don't live in the buildings. They design them, then they walk away. I walked away from the need to be indispensable. I walked into the freedom of being optional. Optional doesn't mean replaceable. It means sustainable, and sustainability is the quiet engine of longevity. The past tried to re-enter one last time, not through drama, through a forwarded email from a mutual acquaintance. A brief note. They're asking for help. They say they've changed. They say they understand now. I read it once. Didn't reply. Didn't forward it. Deleted it. Cleared the cache. Logged out. Reconnecting isn't a neutral term. It's a Trojan horse. Carries expectation. Carries guilt. It carries the unspoken assumption that time erases accountability. It doesn't. Time just reveals it. I knew what they wanted. Not advice. Validation. A bridge back to the network I had quietly maintained for them for years. I wouldn't build it. Bridges require two willing architects. I had already signed off on that project. I archived the request. Not with anger. With finality. Finality is a closed door. It doesn't need a lock. It just needs to stay shut. I kept it shut. Not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. Self-preservation isn't selfish. It's structural. You don't let load-bearing walls become doorways just because someone knocks. You keep them where they belong. I kept mine where they belonged. The third year didn't arrive with a milestone. It arrived as a rhythm. Wake at 6, run, black coffee, work, log off, evening walk, sleep, repeat. The cadence no longer required effort. It required trust. Trust in the architecture I had built. Trust that the foundation would hold without constant inspection. I stopped checking the calendar for anniversaries. Stopped wondering what they were doing. Stopped measuring my peace against their chaos. Comparison is a leak in the foundation. Patched it. I focused on what was in front of me. The quarterly reports. The team metrics. The quiet weekends where I read instead of scrolled. I didn't feel lonely. I felt integrated. Integration is what happens when the fragments stop fighting each other. When the past stops dictating the present. When the future stops feeling like a threat. I sat on a wooden porch at dusk. Watched the streetlights turn on. Thought about the night I left. The note on the door. The hotel room. The burner phone. The single bag. I didn't romanticize it. I didn't regret it. I acknowledged it. Acknowledgement isn't forgiveness. It's recognition. Recognition that I made a choice. That the choice cost me everything I thought I wanted. That it gave me everything I actually needed. I needed myself. Not the version that tolerated erasure. The version that enforced boundaries. The version that walked away from a burning house and didn't look back to see who was holding the matches. I built that version, brick by brick, day by day, quietly, consistently, unapologetically. I learned about their final status through a public business registry. Not a call, not a message, a dissolved entity notice. Both names listed. Outstanding liabilities settled through asset liquidation. No bankruptcy protection. No restructuring. Just closure. The kind that comes when the debt outpaces the income. I read it once. Closed the tab. Felt nothing. Not triumph. Not sorrow. Just recognition. Recognition that actions compound. That choices accumulate. That the interest on conditional loyalty is always due. I didn't cause their fall. I just refused to fund it. And sometimes not funding is the most honest thing you can do. I archived the notice. Filed it under completed cycles. Cycles do not need to be revisited. They just need to be acknowledged. I acknowledged it. Moved to the next task. Approved a vendor contract. Reviewed a compliance report. Walked the dog. Life continued. Not despite the past. Beyond it. I stopped using the word karma to describe what happened. Karma isn't magic. It's accounting. You cannot borrow someone else's discipline and expect it to sustain your choices. You cannot plant betrayal and harvest trust. You cannot burn your foundation and complain about the cold. The bill always arrives. Not with sirens. With receipts. With declined cards. With empty chairs. With mirrors that stop lying. I watched it unfold. Not with satisfaction. With clarity. And clarity, once established, does not need validation. It just needs maintenance.
I
stopped explaining my absence to people who demanded justification. Silence isn't a punishment. It's a boundary. And boundaries don't require an audience. They require enforcement. I enforced them. Every day. In every quiet choice. In every refusal to blur the lines again. I started dating again at 36. Not casually. Carefully. I vetted. I observed. I listened. I didn't rush. I didn't ignore red flags. I didn't confuse attention with intention. I learned that trust is not given. It is earned. And earning takes time. I gave it time. I met someone. Grounded. Clear. Respects boundaries. We didn't merge lives immediately. We didn't sign anything. We just shared time. Shared space. Shared respect. Respect is the baseline of everything that lasts. I learned that the hard way. I do not know if it will last forever. I do not need to know. Forever is a measurement, not a guarantee. I focus on now. Now is enough. Now is safe. Now is honest. That is all I require. The blueprint is complete. The walls are sealed. The roof holds. I am done with the past. I am living in the present. I am building for the future. Not with them. With me. I will keep walking. Quietly. Honestly. Unapologetically, the ledger is balanced. The foundation is solid. The work is mine, and I will keep doing it until the end.